what they did is they hit me with a conspiracy, because the actual charge isn't sedition itself. It's called seditious conspiracy. So they said that I was the leader, and to quote the judge, I was the ultimate leader on the ground that day on January 6th. He said that at my sentencing.
Okay, so just so everyone's clear on this, on January 6th, you were not in Washington, D.C. at all?
Absolutely not.
So the riots happened, okay,
Yes.
on January 6th. You're
Yes.
not in D.C. And then what did they, my understanding is then they say, we think you had something to do with planning this.
I could say whatever I want. Sean, I could go ahead and tell you and be like, yeah, you know what, I did it. But I'm telling you the truth, that at no point did me or any of my guys decide it was a good idea, because I would think it's an actual stupid idea to storm the capital of the people of the free world.
All right, guys, I'm going to tell you this right now before I recap a little of what happened yesterday. You are about to hear a conversation on January 6th that I guarantee you have not heard the likes of before. The details of which I didn't even have a clue about. And I think I kind of watch a lot of stuff. Trust me when I tell you that the conversation that I'm about to have with Enrique Tarrio is mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. He is going to reveal details about January 6th that should shake you to your core about how our government went after people. Trust me. Stay tuned. This is going to be earth-shattering. Caroline Leavitt, though, had her first briefing yesterday. Awesome. She crushed it for numerous reasons. One, she actually provided information. Crazy. She actually answered questions. She clearly showed that she was in touch with the President of the United States, something that Karine Jean-Pierre, I don't know, ever did. It was embarrassing for Karine Jean-Pierre to see what a real press secretary can do when they have information and access and know how to do the job. She did it great. I love the fact, remember I told you guys before, I brought seats back. I brought reporters in the briefing room. I did Skype questions, all sorts of stuff to shake it up. She took it a step further. Let me show you in her own voice what she did.
This White House believes strongly in the First Amendment, so it's why our team will work diligently to restore the press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. We're also opening up this briefing room to new media voices who produce news-related content and whose outlet is not already represented by one of the seats in this room. We welcome independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators to apply for credentials to cover this White House. And you can apply now on our new website, whitehouse.gov/new media. Starting today, this seat in the front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. My team will review the applications and give credentials to new media applicants who meet our criteria and pass United States Secret Service requirements to enter the White House complex. So in light of these announcements, our first questions for today's briefing will go to these new media members whose outlets, despite being some of the most viewed news websites in the country, have not been given seats in this room.
So I love this. Bringing in outside voices and not letting the legacy left-wing media dominate the conversation. Karine Jean-Pierre stripped 400 journalists of their hard pass to go to the White House. Caroline's not only giving it back, she's expanding it. This is what needs to be done. This is embracing the First Amendment, because they didn't say a word when Karine Jean-Pierre took it away from them. I was just awesome. But she also got into issues because everyone's melting down about the president trying to stop federal funding. Freeze it for a minute, pause it, and actually figure out, are we spending your tax dollars that we all work very hard for in a responsible way? God forbid we actually do that, right? I don't want to work any harder or send any more money than I need to Washington. I want it to be respected. So let's hear what she had to say about one of the president's orders to freeze federal grants and spending in a whole host of ways. Take a listen.
During this pause, Doge and OMB have actually found that there was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization, which is an organization, as you all know, that President Trump, with the swipe of his pen in that executive order, is no longer wants the United States to be a part of. So that wouldn't be in line with the president's agenda. Doge and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money. So that's what this pause is focused on, being good stewards of tax dollars.
We're $36 trillion in debt. We overspend our budget, going to deficit spending by trillions a year. And this president is saying, yeah, maybe I should look at this to make sure that your tax dollars are being spent wisely. And everyone in D.C., but what about Meals on Wheels? I mean, you know what? What about actually respecting our tax dollars? Good for him and good on her. This is what we need from government. And it's amazing the whining from the D.C. elites. Calm down. Calm down. All right, like I promised you, we're going to have a conversation with Enrique Tarrio. He was the leader of the Proud Boys that went to jail for January 6th activities. However, never in Washington, never at the Capitol, never planned or plotted anything, and denounces what happened. So how does a guy like that end up in jail? The details of which you're about to hear are mind-blowing. So it's crazy. Before I get to the conversation, though, I got to tell you, 2025 has been a great start for me when it comes to wellness. I'm making a lot of changes, and one of the big things I did right before the new year was kick it off with the folks at PhD Weight Loss. I've told you this before. If you've been watching for a while, I saw how great my buddy Seb Gorka looked. He told me about PhD Weight Loss. I called them up. I started working with them. I'm down a little. I went through the holidays too, which are a tough time, because you get a nutritionist that you call, you talk to, you check in with, I text with about, hey, I'm going to dinner. Here are the alternatives. What do I do? They create a plan for you that helps you lose the weight. And then eventually, when I'm not there yet, maintain it. They help give you some starter food to make it work, but they customize a plan for you that gets you where you want to go and then helps you maintain that. It's so different than every other fad diet out there, because this is a lifestyle change. It all starts with one simple call. Call them now, 1-864-644-1900, or go to myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com. All right. I want to tell you about a great guy before I start our conversation. His name is Leo Grillo. I was actually texting him last night, as a matter of fact, because Leo founded Delta Rescue, which is the world's largest no-kill sanctuary for animals of all sorts. And I'm talking, if you go to deltarescue.org, you get an idea of what I'm talking about. It's dogs, cats, horses, you name it, they take care of them. Abandoned, malnutrition, they take care of all animals. It's amazing what he does at Delta Rescue. And it all works because of donations from people like me and you. They're just outside LA. I talked to them the other day about how the wildfires are affecting them. They're taking a lot more animals. I made a contribution, and I'm hoping you would consider it as well. Go to deltarescue.org, make a contribution, help the great work that Leo does with all of these animals that are abused or abandoned. So go to deltarescue.org. If you're there and you want to make it part of your legacy to help it be an enduring mission, click on the estate planning kit and think about whether you've got an old 401k or stocks that you could help Delta Rescue with when you pass. Thanks for your consideration. Now I want to bring in Enrique Tarrio, who was convicted of sedition regarding January 6th. But when you hear the facts around this case, I think you're going to have a very, very different view of some of the things that happened on January 6th. Let's go. Enrique, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
It's amazing to be here, Sean. It's amazing to be free. And thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. I want to for a lot of people who don't know you or don't understand the circumstances around January 6th, I kind of want to walk through this a little methodically. So take us back to the days leading up to January 6th, because this is what's, I think, somewhat unique about your situation in particular. Walk us through what happened in the days leading up to January 6th with respect to you and your situation with law enforcement.
Okay, so I might have to take you back just a little further.
Go for it.
And just give you a general sense. I have a big group of guys, and we travel around the country. We go to events and stuff like that. And usually when I put events together, there's usually a large crowd that's also with us.
Okay.
So it's responsible. I think it's, as a person that should be responsible, I contact local law enforcement every time that we go, just to tell them, hey, look, we're coming into town.
When you say we and people, like, are you talking about the Proud Boys in a group?
No, I'm talking about Trump supporters in general.
Okay, so you call them, you say, hey, you call law enforcement and say, hey, this is Enrique. I got a big group of Trump supporters. We're coming to X city, and we wanted to give you a heads up.
Yes.
Why?
Because I don't want clashes. I don't want issues, because we've had death threats. We've had specifically on July 3rd of 2019, we actually had a real threat of an acid attack. These members of Antifa decided that it would be a good idea to mix acid with wax, and they wanted to throw it on people. So, and at that point, law enforcement contacted me about that threat. So I don't want clashes. So it's freedom of speech. So if you want to protest Trump supporters, that's 100% fine. But I want to keep both groups separate, because that's where the issues start. So leading up to January 6th, I was in contact with law enforcement, letting them know what our plans were, where were we going to be. And I go a step beyond. As soon as I land in DC, I share my location with local law enforcement, just to so they could see where the events are happening and things like that. So in the lead up to January 6th, I contacted law enforcement and I told them, hey, look, I'm going to be in town. And these are our plans. And our plans were very simple. Our plan was to listen to the president speak in its entirety. And I was actually supposed to speak on two stages, one close to the Washington Monument and another one right by the Capitol. I believe it was 2 p.m. I was scheduled to speak.
Hey guys, I know this conversation with Enrique is riveting, but I want to tell you something real quick. If you have a fire extinguisher, a first aid kit, whatever it is, because you want to be prepared in case of an emergency, then I suggest that you join me and get a life vac. This simple device can easily save a life in the event of a choking incident. So easily that the company called me a couple of weeks ago and said, you're not going to believe this, but one of your viewers purchased a life vac from your show and saved a life. It's that easy. It's that simple in the event of a choking incident. And this is why schools, police stations, fire departments, EMS, cruise lines, restaurants, they all have a life vac now, because it is that easy to save a life in the event of a choking incident. You can be a hero too. And by the way, if your kid's school doesn't have a life vac, they'll send one for free to them. Go to lifevac.net. It's lifevac.net to get one right now. A life literally could depend on it. So go to lifevac.net. All right, let's get back to the conversation with Enrique. So when you contact, in this case, law enforcement in DC, which agency in particular do you contact, and what is their response?
It depends. It depends on the situation. So obviously, the heads of all law enforcement agencies, federal law enforcement agencies, are in DC. So if it's like in the city center, I contact MPD, which is the Metropolitan Police Department. If I'm on the National Mall, I contact Park Police. If I'm on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol, I contact Capitol Police. And I've done this throughout the years. Specifically with January 6th, they assigned a liaison to me, a lieutenant, a 22-year veteran. His name's Shane Lamont. That was my point of contact at that point.
So so you contact them. Hey, I'm coming into DC ahead of January 6th. I've got some events planned. They assign you a liaison. Take it from there.
And it depends on the situation. With
respect to January 4th, 5th, 6th, or whatever this is, walk us through that scenario.
Yeah. So I in this scenario, I contacted them and I told them what my plans were, a timeline. I actually sent them a document that shows exactly all the speaking engagements. And in there was the president's speech, and I think he was going to speak all the way to like 1:15. He was scheduled to speak all the way through 1:15. The president goes beyond that sometimes, but for the most part, I'm sure you know. He and then after that, I at like 1:30, I was supposed to be by the Washington Monument. I don't remember the exact
You know,
specifics,
but let's just so
basically
that's your schedule. So walk us through what happens in the days leading up to January 6th.
okay. So there was a Black Lives Matter banner that was burned.
Okay.
And I took credit for it.
Did you do it?
At this point, yes, I did it.
Okay.
We'll go with that.
Okay, so you burned the banner.
I burned the matter. I admit to it, and I I kind of figured I was gonna get arrested because I was getting contacted by local law enforcement agency. I'm out of Miami-Dade, so Miami-Dade police contacted me, DC police contacted me, and some members of the media that I know that they had, I guess, sources within the police department, the Metropolitan Police Department. They were asking questions, and I kind of put two and two together, and I knew I was going to get arrested going in there, and I was okay with it. And I did. I flew into DC, and the moment I got off the plane, I pretty much got arrested for it. And the
What
judge
day is this?
This is January 4th.
Okay, so the 4th
Okay.
of January, you're arrested for burning a banner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm arrested for burning a banner, and my intention was that's why I specifically flew in on January 4th, because I knew that DC is a no bail state, which they'll bail you out with no cash or whatnot, and they'll bail you out the next day. I knew it was going to be like a misdemeanor. So my intention was get arrested, fight the case, get released on January 5th, and go watch Trump's speech at the Ellipse on January 6th. But there was a wrench thrown into that cog, and the judge said, well, you can't be in DC, which I was okay with. I've seen Trump speak a million times. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to miss a speech. No big deal, whatever. I'll have the guys come over. I went to Baltimore. I'll have the guys come over. We'll have a couple beers, just hang out and just kick back.
Okay,
But-
so just so everyone's clear on this, on January 6th,
Mhm.
you were not in Washington, D.C. at all.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I was in Baltimore, Maryland.
For the sake of time, let's fast forward unless I'm missing something big, because I wanted to establish that clearly. You were not in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. So walk us through what happens next with respect to law enforcement.
Okay, so at that point, I had no communication with law enforcement because they took my phone. So I didn't even have a way to communicate, not just with law enforcement, with nobody. I didn't have a way to communicate with anybody. There was a journalist with me that I got her to call my mom to kind of tell her what the situation was. I know she was watching it on TV, super worried. So I can't tell you what happened with law enforcement because I actually didn't know.
No. But what I want to know is, so the riots happen, okay,
Yes.
on January 6th. You're
Yes.
not in D.C. And then what do they? My understanding is then they say we think you had something to do with planning this.
Yes. So
Okay, why?
because I'm the leader of the group, and they wanted to make the biggest impact that they can make. Because I don't know how you plan what happened at the Capitol. I don't agree with a lot of things that happened at the Capitol that day. I don't know how you plan that being about 100 miles away with no communication, no form of organizing or anything like that. I wasn't worried.
Okay,
I didn't
so let
think
me-
that was-
Enrique, I just want to establish a couple things. Had you been in Washington, D.C. on January 6th,
Mhm.
you said your schedule and your intention was to go listen to President Trump give a speech and maybe at two venues. Was that
Yes.
all you ever discussed doing?
Yes, we actually even planned after these speaking engagements, we're planning a party on the Virginia side with Michael Graves, which was a lead singer for the Misfits, and he was going to do like a little unplugged thing.
Yep.
So we had plans, and none of them.
But your
involved-
plans let me ask it this way. Did your plans ever include going to the U.S. Capitol to protest?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So then for the sake of time, I just wanted to establish that. So law enforcement at some point comes to you and says, Enrique, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what I want to understand. Did they say we're charging you with helping to plan these events that happened at the Capitol?
About a year later, that's exactly what the government alleged. Yes.
Okay. But you have a schedule that you've actually shared with them that says, here's what my plan was. I'm going to two speeches. I got a party in Virginia afterwards where we're going to listen to some music. Why did they? What was it that gave them? Put them under the belief that that was your intention to go to the Capitol and do whatever.
I don't think at any point did they think that I actually did it. I think that they showed their colors in at trial. Um, but at no point did I actually think that they personally believed that I went into the Capitol or I planned to storm the Capitol. Because there was no evidence. It took them a year and a half to find the evidence. And let me tell you what that evidence is.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me a document, right, for a sit-in. It wasn't for assaulting the Capitol. Your viewers can see it online when they search 1776 returns. They made it sound like super ominous. And it was like, it was a plan to stay to sit in. Now that document, I never saw. Somebody sent me that document. It was never opened. The government never alleged that I opened it. They actually said that I didn't open it in open court. So other than that, they had absolutely nothing. Did I celebrate what happened at the Capitol that day on as I saw it on January 6th? Absolutely. Guilty. If that's a crime, go ahead and take me. But I have no idea how they can say that I fomented an insurrection when I'm contacting law enforcement.
Okay. So I just want to restate the facts as we know them now. You were intending to fly to Washington, D.C. You contacted law enforcement to tell law that you were coming to D.C. You provided a schedule to them that showed them where you would be while you were going to be in D.C. that included rallies with President Trump and an event in Virginia after his speech. And nothing in those communications ever show you visiting the Capitol, going to the Capitol in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Okay.
There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever. And there's no evidence because that wasn't the plan. It's not like,
right.
Oh, they didn't find anything.
So,
well, they didn't find anything because that wasn't the plan.
So the government comes to you and says, well, Enrique, we're charging you with, what was it, sedition?
Sedition, yes.
Okay. And you say, time out. I showed you my plans. They never included that. I wasn't even there. There's no evidence that you have that I communicated with anybody about going there, even if I wasn't going to go.
Yeah.
Do you sit back and say, this is like, what does your lawyer tell you at this point?
Well, first off, they didn't just come to me and say that. They turned my door into splinters at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Walk us through that. So what happens? You get a knock at the door? Or do they just barrel it down?
They knocked and then barreled it down. But that was at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was dead asleep. I had just come from a meeting the prior night, and I came home late, so I was super tired. And I was laying in bed, and I hear the banging on the door, and I'm like, what the hell? I wake up my wife, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Like, did you hear that? And then the next thing I knew, it was a pow. I came out. I kind of knew what was going on because they kept screaming FBI. So
how many agents?
A whole squad. I mean, they put like a whole tank outside and
20,
drones.
30?
Probably upwards of 30 to 40 agents and local law enforcement.
Do you live in an apartment or a complex? Like, did your neighbors freak out?
Yes, my neighbors did freak out. I live in a home right at the heart of Miami, so I have a lot of neighbors, and they all came out at 5 o'clock in the morning in boxers and.
So what happens next? Do they put you in cuffs and arrest you? Do they tell you what's going on?
They put me in cuffs and arrest me, and they had told me, I'm like, what are you guys here for? And they told me, well, you're here because I hadn't gotten charged with sedition yet, because that was a superseding indictment later on. I got charged with the 1512 that got overturned by the Supreme Court, the fifth obstructing an official proceeding. Wait.
So I'm just sorry, because I want to make sure I don't want to miss any details. So I apologize with.
It's okay.
But at this point, you're saying proceeding of what? Because I'm not in Washington, D.C. I didn't obstruct anything, and there was no proceeding I went to. So is that, I mean, that to me immediately is what's jumping out for me.
Yeah. So the other four gentlemen that were part of my case, they did go in the Capitol, and they don't say that they didn't. They did trespass. We weren't charged with anything violent. And then what they did is they hit me with a conspiracy, because the actual charge isn't sedition itself. It's called seditious conspiracy. So they said that I was the leader, and to quote the judge, I was the ultimate leader on the ground that day on January 6th. He said that at my sentencing. It sounds cool. They make me sound like some Bond villain, and I might write a fiction about it, but it's not true. I'm sitting here, I'm pardoned. I could say whatever I want. Sean, I could go ahead and tell you and be like, yeah, you know what, I did it. But I'm telling you the truth that at no point did me or any of my guys decide it was a good idea, because I would think it's an actual stupid idea to storm the capital of the people of the free world.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because I think
Yeah.
I wanted to get to that. And again, I want to, because of how you've been portrayed in the media, I want to just get you to ask you, I mean, do you like, there are a range of people with respect to January 6th. And I believe that if you hit a cop, I don't really care what's going on, or hit another. I mean, I've denounced violence in all phases, right? Do you share that view that violence is not acceptable, whether it's January 6th or not?
There's no realm that I will condone violence against any human being, regardless of political ideology or anything else, any describing factor. At no point is that okay. I'll denounce it the moment I see it. And I've said it millions of times, and I said it that day, Sean. I said, I don't agree with what happened. You know, you trespass, get hit with trespassing. You put your hands on a police officer, you should be arrested and charged with that. It's not, if I was on the ground that day, I don't even think the 4 guys that I got charged with, I don't even think they would have gone into the Capitol that day, because just timeline, I'd be speaking at an event. The Capitol was actually breached before the president stopped speaking.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because the media won't tell you that.
Yes.
If you do the timeline from what it takes to walk from where that speech was to the Capitol, the breach occurs. So let me ask you this, because I want to get to the nut of this quick. What we just said is a fact. If you watched that rally, you were present for the speech that President Trump did, and you decided to walk to the Capitol, by the time you would have gotten there, everything would have been going down, right? That's a fact.
Takes so I've obviously, part of my case, I lived inside my discovery and my evidence in my case. At 12:58, the first breach happens, right? The first breach, which is the fence that got toppled over. President Trump didn't stop speaking until about like 1:15. And it takes 30 minutes. Takes 30 minutes for a person to walk from the ellipse to the Capitol.
Yep. Okay. So then let's just get to it. What happened on January 6th in the Capitol? Who were the people that planned this and plotted it? Who were the bad people in this situation?
So, one, I think it was a protest gone wrong, and I think there was a lot of agitators in the crowd. I haven't been able to see. I've seen some evidence of it, of people that just came in, shook a fence, riled up the crowd, and then walked back, which is classic. And at every breach point, there is that person or a couple people doing that. There's a lot of people that, just got, most people that went into the Capitol got caught up in the moment. Again, I'm not going to condone anybody
right.
putting
But
their
what I'm
hands
trying to
on
get
law
at,
enforcement.
what I'm trying to get at, Enrique, is I don't, like you just laid out the timeline.
Yes.
The people that were on the ellipse listening to President Trump could not be the same people who breached the Capitol at the moment. I mean, eventually, potentially. No. But the idea is, so what I'm trying to figure out from people like you that have lived this is, was this just, to your point, a bunch of agitators that went nuts, or was there a plot that was executed on that day by people who knew exactly what they were doing, that they wanted to breach the Capitol?
From my perspective, from seeing things, I have not seen, because I didn't only have access to my discovery. I had access to the discovery of all January 6th, all the evidence in January 6th. I have not seen any evidence of actual pre-planning by anybody to breach the Capitol.
So do you, I guess, again, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you exactly. So you don't believe that there was ever an actual group of people that said, hey, tomorrow we're going to go to the Capitol and do this. It was sort of an independent group of agitators who just got overcome by events. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's my opinion on it, and that's what I've seen, and that's what the evidence shows.
Okay. Let's talk about the feds. There is now factual evidence that federal informants were there that day.
Yes.
In your opinion, and based on what you've seen, was that coincidence, or were those folks placed there?
So those folks were placed there specifically with our case, and I can talk to it with experience on it. Specifically on our case, the FBI had embedded 26 FBI informants. The funny part is that the government never called any of them to testify because they kind of all said the same thing, that there wasn't any pre-planning done by any of the guys. But within that group of 26, there was a gentleman that we called to the stand, not the prosecutors. We called to the stand, and we saw he was at a very pivotal moment in at the Capitol. I don't know if you remember, there's this video that it shows. I don't know where it is in the Capitol, because I've never been there. I hope to take a Capitol tour at some point. But it's like a garage door that's coming down. I don't know if you've seen it. It's inside the Capitol. The garage door is coming down. It's like an aluminum door.
Yeah.
And this person is a paid FBI informant. He's been doing this for 10 years where he infiltrates groups. That person, while that gate was coming down so it could secure the members of Congress going through the tunnel, this gentleman grabbed a pedestal and ran over there and put it so the door can't go down, and that allowed more Capitol protesters to continue their path forward. We asked him that on the stand under oath, and he said yes, he did it. We asked him, well, were you told to do it? He refused to answer. But he did say that the FBI gives them some leeway on committing crimes, and I'm not making this up. It's not a conspiracy. It's in the transcripts. He goes ahead and he says that he is allowed to commit crimes in order to further his information gathering assignment, I guess.
Wow. There is a gentleman that's gotten a lot of attention named Ray Epps,
Yes.
who is on tape telling people, let's go to the Capitol. And people are yelling at him, Fed, because they believe he's an informant for for law enforcement.
Tomorrow, we need to go into the Capitol. Into the Capitol. What? No! Peacefully. Fed.
I find it odd that a guy who is on tape saying, let's go do this, right? Basically gets a slap on the wrist. What do you think of it?
So if you take Mr. Epps and you just go by the video that you saw, right? That most of America has seen, where he's saying something along the lines of, we need to storm the Capitol, blah, blah, blah. And let's say he didn't show up that day at the Capitol. He already did more than I did.
Well, that's why, right. So this is a guy who's encouraging people. You weren't in town, and yet there's something odd about his case that I think is not coming out.
Yeah, he didn't do a single day in jail. He's going on his little media tour. He's playing the victim. I honestly think we didn't have access to his files. That's another thing that's kind of weird. We didn't have access to his files. We had access to everybody's files. Well, my lawyers did, because the government did not allow me to see the evidence of the informants. My lawyers had to go into an FBI field office, go into a monitored room. They couldn't take laptops. All they could take was a notepad, and they had terabytes of information they had to go through, and they couldn't take that evidence out. And they couldn't even show me exactly what it was, just the events that happened. And that's how we found out a lot of things about these informants.
Right.
We didn't know there was 26 informants. The government didn't tell us beforehand. We had to force the judge to allow that to be seen.
So let me just ask you this. What did you think when you got President Trump's pardon? And what do you want to do going forward? Do you feel a need for retribution, or are you just like, I'm glad that chapter of my life is behind me?
Okay, so I was very happy that we have a president that keeps his promises. He did pardon those people that did put their hands on a police officer, but he didn't pardon them. He said he was going to go case by case, and that's what he did. He didn't pardon them because of their acts. He pardoned them because of the process. The process was corrupt. Therefore, the only solution to solve that, the only solution was a pardon. Um, I was extremely happy. My family, more than ever, my family was extremely. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life rotting in a federal prison for a crime I didn't commit. The thing I'm happiest most about, I got to hug my mom again, right? And moving forward, the past 3 years, I've been jotting down my plans of what I'm going to do for business, what I'm going to do for my political life. And I kind of 2 months ago, I kind of just took an eraser to it, and I kind of just said, you know what? I'm just gonna, for the first 2 months, I'm gonna enjoy life, and then I'm gonna sit alone after these 2 months and figure out what the rest of my life holds. But um, retribution, right? Is there any form of retribution? I'd say yes, but I want to clarify what retribution means to me personally. It doesn't mean violence. It doesn't mean I wanna enact revenge, that typical revenge. My retribution and my revenge is I want these people investigated. If they didn't do anything wrong, they don't have to worry about it. And I think we should start with the top up. We should start with Merrick Garland, Steve Bannon, like him or not. Steve Bannon did 3 months for not complying with a congressional subpoena. Merrick Garland did the same thing. He's not pardoned by Biden. And I think we should start there, move our way down to Michael Graves. I mean, we could do this all day.
Okay. Enrique, I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this. This is what's important because the media won't tell people this story. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you.
You bet. Guys, that was unbelievable. Unbelievable. I cannot, I mean, of all the conversations we've had on the show, that may be one of the most enlightening for me. All right. I want to continue the conversation about what's going on in the legal world with our good friend Will Chamberlain over at the Article 3 Project to talk about nominations, pardons, and everything else. Will Chamberlain. Will, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Sean.
All right. I want to talk Biden pardons, maybe a little confirmation. But before I get to that, as a non-lawyer, we just had this conversation with Enrique Tarrio, right? I don't understand how the circumstances of his case went through the legal system. So here's a guy charged with sedition or seditious conspiracy or something like this, who wasn't in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, had a schedule that he shared with law enforcement prior to coming that said, here's what I'm going to be doing when I'm in Washington, which is attend a rally, and then after the rally, go to Virginia to hear some music. And there are no documents linking him to planning or discussing ever going to the Capitol or any follow-on activities. I just don't understand in our system of justice, how does a guy like that end up going to jail?
Yeah, I don't know how he gets charged with a seditious conspiracy count. I think it's bizarre. The idea that the guy was actually trying to conspire to overthrow the United States government is absurd. And it's laughable, actually. But it's sort of, that connects to the broader problem with all these prosecutions, which is that they were brought in. And I don't think any Republican political activist can reasonably expect a jury of their peers in D.C. It's 95% Democrat, full of Democratic, politically motivated people. And I think that as a result, prosecutors were able to just put whatever evidence they wanted in front of these juries, and the juries would, go forward and convict these defendants regardless of what the evidence actually entailed.
One of his suggestions was that there should be an investigation starting with Merrick Garland on down into what their motivations were for bringing these cases in. Were they politically motivated? Was it lawfare? Do you agree that that has to happen at the Department of Justice?
I mean, I agree that it has to happen. I think it was sort of obviously lawfare. Like, we know they told us what their motivations were. They were, and it was almost bipartisan after January 6th, was they were, you heard people like Lindsey Graham being like, throw all these people in jail forever. That was, the motivation of these prosecutors was to go after January 6th defendants and to get as much jail time for as many of them as they possibly could, regardless of, and not really care about prior precedents in terms of how similar protests were treated previously. And so as a result, you got these wildly disproportionate sentences, and that really did require correction on the president.
So as a non-lawyer, I kind of always have this view about our legal system and our justice system that might be a bit naive, admittedly, that I believe, you get the phone call after you get arrested, the lawyer coming. I watch maybe too much TV on this stuff. But I start hearing these cases about how they were thrown in jail and just left there. You're hearing a lot of stories. They call it diesel something or other, where they're showing how they take these guys to different jails, hold them there for a while, and then move them so that people couldn't, they kind of were inadvertently denying them of access to their lawyers or whatever by moving them from one prison to another, where they would put them in solitary confinement. Is this the norm that we just don't know about? Does this happen more than maybe someone like me thinks? Or is this really an outlier because it was lawfare against political enemies?
It's an outlier, but maybe not as much as we would hope. It's an outlier in the sense that how vindictive, in particular, these prosecutors were towards this whole group of defendants. But it is true that the federal criminal justice system is very, very tough on criminal defendants. And in many ways, a lot of people assume that a lot of these due process protections exist, but they really don't. They don't exist meaningfully. And so many of these defendants, there's a reason that 99% of these cases plea out. And what especially you hear that's really interesting from a lot of J6 defendants is they felt like in order to plead guilty and get the benefit of any type of plea deal, they had to accept lies about their conduct and what they did.
And that's what I think is so untold. That, like, a lot of times people will say, like, well, they pled guilty. And in some cases, maybe they are. I don't know what the number is, but I'm just saying, to your point, there's a lot of times when they come and say, we've got the full weight of the federal government behind us. Either plead to this charge or we're going to drain your life.
Right. And not just that, but like most of these guys, a lot like Biggs and Tarrio, they were offered plea deals that were like, well, you're going to take 7 years. And I'm sure that they were like, what? Are you kidding? Who did I hurt? It rang from their perspective. Like they didn't, they were like, protesting and they trespassed. And suddenly that's 20 years in jail. Wait, I'm sorry. Come again. Right. It doesn't make sense. But, when you start talking about jailing people for 20 years and having a credible threat of doing so, you're effectively able to coerce guilty pleas out of people who may have been totally innocent.
All right. I want to switch gears and talk about the Biden pardons. When he preemptively pardoned his family, what goes through someone like yours mind in terms of what does this do to the process? What does it mean going forward for pardons, et cetera?
I have sort of a contrarian perspective on this, which is, one, I expected these pardons to come down. I didn't care how much he insisted or any of his apparatchiks insisted, oh, we're not going to pardon. But Joe's not going to pardon his family. Of course he was going to do that because, one, there's criminal activity that they were involved in, very obviously, if you followed what happened with Tony Bobolitsky and all the revelations about their dealings with Chinese-affiliated energy companies. And then second, it's just not going to let anybody go after his family. So I'm not surprised that he pardoned them. And second, I sort of think that I've seen enough lawfare, and I think that it will create a new world where the default expectation of presidents is that they'll pardon large swaths of their administration as they're leaving office. And I don't even know that that's a bad thing, honestly. Like I think that given the alternative is a world where we're prosecuting each other into the ground and really ruining the power of the executive branch and really hurting our country. I'm not one for unilateral disarmament, so I believe that because the Biden people did it to us, we should absolutely be looking to do it to them. I think it's important to not just let yourself be exploited in that sense. Mm-hmm. But I do think the best world for our country is one where neither side is using lawfare against the other once they are empowering the other side's out.
Is it your contention that accepting a pardon, whether it's Dr. Fauci or whomever, is an admission of guilt?
That's the legal standard. If you're asking what I personally say, I don't think that's true. I think it's unreasonable to demand that people go through the criminal justice system to avoid admitting guilt in some nebulous sense. So I understand that obviously people will accept pardons, and I don't begrudge them. We just talked about how terrible the federal criminal justice system is and how the process can be the punishment. So I don't begrudge anybody for saying to themselves, yeah, I'll take the pardon, even if I think I will be vindicated in trial. Like, I don't want to go through a trial just to get vindicated. That's
right. I know. Yeah, it's a lot of time and money. Were you surprised that Joe Biden didn't pardon himself?
No, because I think there's some question about whether that power even exists. The power on the self-pardon. I mean, Trump didn't do it. I'm not surprised Biden didn't do it. I also think Biden probably thought to himself it would be unnecessary at his age. I just don't see even in a world where Republicans got particularly antagonistic, I just don't see them prosecuting a guy who's, 83 and senile. So I don't think it would have been necessary.
I think one of the things that shocked me was they talk a lot about President Trump's pardons and compare him to the family, but what's also missing are the criminals, the violent criminals who Biden also pardoned or commuted their sentences.
Yeah, those pardons were appalling, and we saw them in two respects. First, I mean, we saw him commute the sentences of everybody on federal death row to life in prison. There's a reason those people are on federal death row. There was a judge, Alex Kaczynski, who said that when he came into being a federal judge, and being a little skeptical of the death penalty. But he said, you read a few these death row cases and you understand why the death penalty exists, that you can hear the cries of the victim screaming out from between the lines of the dry Google text.
The last thing I wanted to ask you is this. So Hunter Biden and the Biden family have been pardoned. Can they still be pursued criminally for certain things? And then secondly, what could Congress could now haul them up and they can't claim the Fifth Amendment? Is that correct?
Right. I don't think there's much that can be done to prosecute them because, I mean, it's a massive pardon over a period of 10 years of activity of any crimes against the United States. So I don't think there's any reasonable way to overcome that in terms of actually criminally prosecuting them. But I think that's what you described is, in fact, the silver lining. They don't have any reasonable claim to the Fifth Amendment. And really, I think we should actually find out what exactly they were up to. And the only thing that they don't have protection for, they don't have protection for future crimes, so they're not allowed to perjure themselves. So they should be expected to be summoned to the stand and testify about their conduct.
So Jim Jordan calls them to testify in front of his committee in Congress. Is there any weasel way that they could get out of a subpoena?
I mean, I think they would try and say that, well, we still have some state criminal liability, possibly. I don't think that's true. I think that'd be a very interesting question to litigate. I think that that would be their claim, and then there'd have to be some sort of litigation to resolve whether or not that's a reasonable Fifth Amendment claim. Like, even if you've been pardoned for all federal crimes you may have committed, somehow there might be some state law crimes that you have. I don't think that works because I think the pardon would subsume even the state law crimes as well, ultimately. And I don't think, also, I'm not sure that there are state law crimes there, that all these crimes that they're describing necessarily have federal nexus. So we'll see.
Unbelievable. Will Chamberlain, I appreciate you and everything you guys at the Article 3 Project do. I know you're doing a ton to help the confirmations as well. So thank you guys for all of the efforts you're putting in to get President Trump's people into office.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
You bet. Thank you. All right. Thanks for tuning in. What a show we had today. Remember, sign up for my free newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. You'll get inside insights about everything that's going on in the Trump administration, Tuesdays and Fridays. Great drop yesterday, by the way, about Trump's first week. Go check it out in the media. SeanSpicer.com. Always love a VIP membership. Tomorrow, we've got a great panel. And Friday, we're talking DEI. Wow. You're not going to want to miss those. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.